People would come into my store and I would just take out a pad of paper and write out the training plan for them and hand it to them. That was how I got started.
Rather than dealing with fax and email attachments and everything, athlete and coach could have a much better experience.
He had reached out and was like, hey, my dad is doing this coaching stuff using fax machines and
best man at my wedding. And he was the only web developer I knew in the entire world.
You do like internet stuff. Is there a way that we could do this on the internet?
We were at the right place at the right time with the right message. Sometimes you're lucky and sometimes you aren't. And we were very lucky.
From Escape Collective, this is Overnight Success, the podcast about the entrepreneurs, the personalities, and the passionate people who make up the sport of cycling and the stories behind the icons they've built. In 1999, Joe Friel was drowning in faxes. Remember faxes? The legendary cycling coach who later wrote the pivotal book, The Cyclist Training Bible, had a whopping 72 clients sending him trading data via fax machine every Monday morning, creating stacks of paper that covered his entire desk. His son Dirk, racing professionally in Belgium, thought there had to be a better way. Over beers at a bar called The George in Vail, Colorado, Dirk convinced the best man at his wedding and the only web developer he knew, Gear Fisher, to build a solution and just paying him $3,000, in which that handshake deal would later become TrainingPeaks, the platform that now powers the training of every serious endurance athlete from weekend warriors to Tour de France champions. If you've ever worked with a coach or followed a structured training plan, you've probably used TrainingPeaks at some point. But here's what fascinated me while I was researching this episode. TrainingPeaks isn't necessarily a platform built first for athletes. I mean, athletes certainly use and pay for it, but the brilliance is that it's the coaches who are the primary customer. That counterintuitive insight transformed a simple web app into an over 300-person company that includes everything from a virtual cycling platform like Zwift to music education software to gaming. I bet you didn't know that. For me, this is a very personal story. Joe Friel's Cyclist Training Bible book literally changed my life 30 years ago. Back then, I'd eagerly sit hitting refresh on my email inbox, waiting for his Ultra Fit newsletter to arrive each month. It was one of the only sources of real training knowledge made for the masses back then. In this episode, I'm thrilled to bring you the remarkable founding story of TrainingPeaks, told by Joe and Dirk Friel themselves, along with their co-founder Gear Fisher, who ran the company for nearly 20 years. It's a story about solving your own problems, the power of focusing on the right customer, and how three guys with no business plan built one of the most important platforms in endurance sports.
It really all goes back to probably, if you had to pick a date, it would probably be 1983. I owned a running store, and the bike store was for sale next door to my running store, so I bought it also. And the other one was working for as a fundraiser for a nonprofit organization in town in Fort Collins, where I lived at the time.
Yeah.
And finally, in 1992, I hit my number of 72 clients. And so I quit my day jobs and just started coaching full time. And from that point on, it gets really complicated. There's so many things going on, but it was a fun time. That was kind of the origins of my coaching.
How much were you charging? Do you remember, Joe? How much per athlete?
Yeah, I was charging $150 a month when I got my 72 clients, which isn't a lot of money, but you have to realize also this is like 30 some years ago. So the dollar wasn't worth it was worth a lot more than it is right now. And so consequently I was able to start paying the bills, but I wasn't getting wealthy. That's for sure.
From what little I know about the coaching business though, 72 clients is unthinkable these days. Is that fair to say?
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I was not able to keep up with everybody. After a while you begin to forget who you're coaching, and it became a disaster at times, but So I'm up late every night. I was working till like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, trying to keep up with all the stuff that was going on. And so I was trying to give my clients quality coaching, but it was really difficult with 72 clients.
Joe contracted a virus while visiting Australia, while feeding birds, he thinks, and that led to a heart valve issue. This forced him to stop training for 9 months, which gave him the unexpected time to write the Cyclist Training Bible, a book that would sell thousands of copies in its first few months and launch his writing career that cemented his status as one of the most influential endurance coaches of our time. Meanwhile, his son Dirk was an aspiring bike racer.
So yeah, that was 1990. I was living in Colorado. We had great races here every weekend, stage races and amazing athletes, Bobby Julich, and all kinds of other great local talent that was coming up. And so I thought it was time to go to Europe. And it's all I ever thought of from being age 12 on. So I actually dropped out of college. I did like a year of college and then got a one-way ticket, as you mentioned. And Belgium was a place to go because you could just race every single day and just go for it, So yeah, I spent 5 seasons over there. I did 3 years amateur and then turned pro, and was 2-year professional over there. And then I finally retired from pro racing in 2002. So I turned pro in 92 and retired in 2002.
Right. And Joe, tell me about the coach-athlete relationship of that period and how it worked, but how you got training files and communicated in that. What was that like as a coach? And Dirk, feel free to chime in from your side as an athlete.
He will, because he came up with a solution. The problem was that just the thing you're talking about right here is my biggest problem, was communication. It wasn't too bad when I had the store and people would come into my store and I would just take out a pad of paper and write out the training plan for them and hand it to them. That was how I got started. And then I started getting people, farther away that couldn't come in the store easily. So I'd write a letter to them and send in postal mail to them. And that wasn't great either. And then I finally decided to start using the fax machine.
Well, yeah, we had, as you mentioned, we were using the fax machine, but we were also using email and email attachments. And by now, you not only had polar heart rate files, but you now had, some people had SRMs. You had a .srm file. You had a .csv file from PowerTap. PowerTap was starting to come out, the early versions of PowerTap. And so every single device manufacturer had their own file format, which meant when you got it as an email attachment, you would have to open up that file in that manufacturer's own proprietary software. So now you had, 3 or 4 different apps open to view heart rate data or power file or whatever it may be. And this was the late 90s. So it's the, the internet's coming up. We haven't had the .com bust yet, but it was definitely the heyday of the internet, all things internet, and
Yeah.
And so I just had that vision of, there's a whole lot better way of doing this if we could somehow all share the same calendar, workout menus, training log. Athlete and coach could have a much better experience of working with a coach rather than dealing with fax and email attachments and everything. Communications was always delayed and there was always a lag when you're dealing with, faxes and email. And so, that was the vision. So it was 1999. And I pitched the idea, to Joe, but neither of us were technologists. We were the practitioners. We were the entrepreneurs, but we weren't the technicians when it came to building a website, right? But luckily, Gear Fisher was a teammate, best man at my wedding, and he was the only web developer I knew in the entire world. And he was living up in the mountains, up near Vail, Colorado. And I remember going up there with my wife and having a beer at this bar still exists in Vail in the village. It's called the George. And Gear's real name is George, and Joe's real name is George. So I'm the only non-George in this story.
Okay.
And we met at the George, which is still there in Vail Village. And I bought Gear some beers, and he agreed, like, "Yeah, that sounds really cool." He knew all about the books, our coaching. He understood the lingo, the training, the power, the heart rate, all that stuff. So he was like, "Ah, this is natural. Let's try and build this." And he had a day job, and I was still racing pro. I was also coaching. So this was at night. This is the late hours type of thing we would do. It was bootstrapped, and it was old school. There was no business plan. There was no raising money. There was no debt. It was just sweat equity, the old way of building a business from the ground up. And so we started in 99 building it, and we went live in 2000, and we had a coaching group called Ultra Fit. And at that time, I don't know in 2000 how many coaches we had.
10 to 12, something like that.
Yeah. And so it was an in-house like app that we would, use within our coaching business. And that was the purpose of it, was to make the quality of our coaching service to our clients, as high as possible, as easy as possible on both sides, for the coach and the athlete. And immediately there was, wins immediately, like the communication, the training log, the workout calendar, everything. And Dad, if you want to tell the story of how we originally modeled it off of what you built on a beach in Cayman.
Now, let me bring in the third co-founder, Gear Fisher, who was the only web developer Dirk knew and would become the technical architect behind TrainingPeaks.
Well, I love talking about it. It was a great time in the world of the internet, and for my own career. Basically, I had been racing bikes with Dirk for a few years. We met back in the 80s in college, and I knew him obviously really well. I knew his dad a little bit, and it was the late 90s. He'd come back from racing in Belgium, and Joe had been building a coaching company. I was off doing civil engineering, and then in 1997 changed careers to this internet programming stuff. And so I was doing HTML and back-end programming and whatnot. I was just fascinated by computers. And when Dirk returned from Belgium, he had reached out and was like, "Hey, my dad is doing this coaching stuff using fax machines, and you do like internet stuff. Is there a way that we could do this on the internet?" And that was right as I would call a web application was becoming a thing. And so I was like, I worked for a little consulting firm. Our main client was Hewlett Packard and a few other groups. And that's what we did. We built web applications in the late 90s that solve the needs of various internal and external corporate, companies. So I was like, yeah, I think I could do that. And, the whole problem being solved was essentially taking Joe's training Bible methodology and converting it to a web-based, self-managed tool that would do the computations for periodization for you, that would have a library of exercises, that would allow you to build an organized sort of calendar of training, essentially along the lines of the Joe Friel, method, if you will, which is really not the Joe Friel method. He'll be the first to say it's really Tudor Bompa's periodization stuff. But anyway, I came along and Dirk threw this out at me, and I was like, I think I could build something that'd be pretty fun as a little side job.
Did you immediately see a business opportunity here, or were you just like, this would be fun, this is tinkering around? Or did you guys start with, okay, well, we better make a partnership agreement, shareholder agreement, and all that sort of stuff? Or was this just like foreign to you guys at the time, and you're just like, let's get at it, let's start programming?
Yeah, that's funny because it was basically like, hey, I'd love to try and do this. And I started going after it just for fun. And then I was like, hey, Dirk, this is going to take me a little bit of time and energy. How about I do it on a contract basis? And I said, I'll do it for $3,000. I'll build you a system that does all this stuff, an ATP, a training log, and a planning tool and whatnot. And Joe and Dirk were like, okay, cool. $3,000. We can handle that.
Yeah.
Get after it. But it was in about, I want to say it was about June of 2000 that I think I'm credited for this, but it was really all of us. And I was like, hey, we had released it to Joe's internal UltraFit coaches. And I was like, if we tweaked a couple things here, we could make this an actual subscription business and let anybody use the tool. They paid me to build a tool for Joe's UltraFit coaching business. And I was like, I think there's a bigger opportunity here to let just individual people and other coaches outside of Joe's coaching company use this. And they were like, okay, let's try it. And I spent the next 3, 4, 5 months tweaking everything so that anyone could use it, right? Creating accounts and creating a payment structure. And we launched the actual subscription business in September of 2000.
So Gear had agreed to build this web application for $3,000, but there was still one critical question. What exactly should it look like? How do you take a coach's methodology and turn it into software? Joe had actually already solved this problem in the most analog way possible. How else but sitting on a beach in the Cayman Islands?
The problem was when I was sending like faxes and email attachments to athletes, I didn't have a format. It was just, loosely typed out and sent off as like you'd send a letter to somebody. And so my wife and I was coaching a guy in Cayman Island, and he invited us down, my wife and I, to come down and spend a week there and just enjoy the beach. He had a private residence we could use on the beach in Cayman Island, which is a beautiful place, by the way. And so every day we'd go out on the beach and we'd sit there watching the waves come in when we weren't exploring the town. And I had discovered this app, which we didn't call an app back in those days, but it was basically kind of like some of the software that's available today that where you can have various fields that you can rearrange in any way you want.
I think it was FileMaker.
Could be. So it was so you could rearrange all of these fields that you wanted to put things in, and you could put down drop-down menus. So I could put in a drop-down menu in a field for workouts, and I could select a workout from the drop-down field, and it would plug it in automatically without me typing the entire workout out. And so then there were other benefits to it also, but it was still kind of time consuming to get it all done. But I did the whole thing laying on the beach in Cayman Island. That's where I designed the whole thing. And we came back, we all began to use that with our clients. I mean, we being all the coaches in UltraFit. And that was this way we started out with TrainingPeaks also. I started out with that very same platform that I designed on the beach in Cayman Island, whatever it was. I've forgotten when it was, probably 98 or so.
Wow.
Maybe
Yeah.
97.
Yeah. And it was, as you mentioned, the drop-down menus and everything, it was all based around a calendar. And so click Monday, drop-down menu, do a swim, bike, or run, choose the bike workout, how many hours, just like basically TrainingPeaks works today. And that would plop it in on Monday, and then you do Tuesday and Wednesday. And then, but funny enough, at the end of developing the schedule is you would hit fax. You would like select like file, fax, and then you would fax it from, I'm pretty sure it's FileMaker Pro at the time. And and so we showed that to Gear, and he was like immediately like lit up, like, oh, like he had an architecture to work from, in a web. So yeah, that was kind of the model of the original TrainingPeaks was from what Joe created on the beach.
Gear, when did you know that this was more than just a side project for you?
Yeah, good one. I remember it very clearly. So we put it out there. The UltraFit Associates, that was Joe's company's name, had been using it all summer, and we were getting great feedback. And I just loved it. I loved the feedback loop from customers. I learned my internal delight comes from seeing people get value out of something that I helped create. And so it was actually in about April of 2001, we were doing this on the side. Maybe we had $500 of people paying. And in April of 2001, I told my actual work, which was a consulting engineering firm for building websites and web apps. I said, I want to take a leave of absence. And they're like, okay, that's fine. Come back in September. And so from as of April of 2001, I took this leave of absence, and I think the first paid employee. I was getting $5,000 a month from TrainingBible.com at the time. And I spent all summer just nonstop, every minute of the day, building functionality and features and listening to the coaches and testing. And we grew it and grew it. And I went back to work in September of 2001. And I was there for exactly one day. And they're like, hey, welcome back. We need to send you up to Wisconsin to go meet with this client. And I was just like, I came back and told my wife, I'm like, I can't do it. I gotta do this Training Bible thing. And so I quit in September of 2001. Thankfully, she had a job. She had insurance. I sold my car. We sold a couple other things, reduced our expenses, and I went full time. That's when I actually went full time with Training Bible and had one other customer that was paying me. So that was fall of 2001.
You mentioned earlier, Dirk, that there's no business plan, no raising money, just sweat equity. So at this point, was Gear an employee, or did you create a separate business knowing that this is actually something different and he had equity in the business? Or how did that, or did you even think about that at the time? Or was this just, hey, Gear, let's just do something fun?
I have an email, I believe, whereby we were contracting with him, and we asked about his contract labor pricing, and we settled on a price and paid him some price for the initial. And I'll let you fill in the gaps if you have. But then I remember him. We went live in 2000, and he was the one that had the idea, like, hey, other coaches would love to leverage this, and this could become a business. And so at that point, we did separate the books and create a separate entity, and then started selling it, to other coaching businesses. And then that revenue came into a totally separate software business.
So the business side was taking shape, Gear, but I'm guessing the product development was a typical pure startup chaos. Take me through how you decided what features to build and the product roadmap.
It was the opposite of methodical. It was me and Dirk. So the secret sauce was Joe is the legendary methodology and coach, right? Wrote the book. Dirk was the hands-on. I talked to clients every single day, and I was the tech guy, right?
Yeah.
So it was in the framework of what Joe laid down. It was the day-to-day of what Dirk dealt with every single day. And then it was me, like, just answering tech support questions and stuff. So the roadmap, it wasn't even a roadmap. It was simply listening to our customers, of which there must have been dozens at the time. Like, oh, we wish it did this. And I mean, Dirk and I were kind of mind melded. We had a vision of what we thought it could be. And that was really the driving force behind it. And I still say that 25 years later, the best way to be a product manager is to have a vision of what the product is. And that vision should guide all of your development efforts from all the various inputs. And you should be always on a path to achieving a vision of a product that you see. So no, it was purely feedback. Like, Dirk and I would be like, oh man, it'd be so cool if it did this. And I was like, all right, give me a few days. I think I can make it do that. And then we'd hear a coach say, oh, if only you could do that. And I'd be like, I think I can do that. And I would go and spend, 2 days straight coding something. And then I would reach out to that coach and I'd say, look what we did. We did it. And they'd be like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And there was just that feedback loop constantly for honestly years.
While Gear had his head down building features, something interesting was happening with their user base. Joe says they started noticing a pattern about where the real growth was coming from, and it wasn't where they initially expected.
Yeah, we were our first initially we were focused on selling bringing in athletes to use the app. But later on, much later on, actually, we realized that if you brought in one coach, you might get 10 to 12 athletes instead of trying to find 10 or 12 athletes, just hire one coach or find one coach. So that became kind of a major event for us. We came to that realization that our market was really coaches, not that we were turning athletes away. They can come in and use the app the same as anybody else. But coaches make the business more profitable. We can bring in a lot more people with a lot less effort to try to bring them on board.
Here's where the story takes an interesting turn. They discovered something counterintuitive about their market.
It sounds like you were trying to solve a problem for coaches more than athletes. Is that a fair statement at this time?
We didn't realize that though. We thought we were just trying to solve our coaches' problems for UltraFit. And then when we decided to go live, as Dirk was talking about, that's when we decided that our market really is athletes, and we put a lot of our energy into selling to athletes. And then later on, we get to realize, no, it's really coaches is our market.
Yeah.
So it kind of evolved over time.
At the beginning, you kind of mentioned it, you basically laid out the Cyclist training Bible and the methodologies within that in an app, in a web app. The fascinating thing that I found through researching and then talking to Joe and Dirk was, as a user of TrainingPeaks, I've used it for years. I only see the consumer part of it. I didn't realize this was the business was basically for coaches, right? A B2B to C business, which I think is not only very clever, but fascinating and not very obvious, and just completely different mindset of decision-making with the roadmap and everything than I was sort of coming at it from to begin these interviews. Was that the intent from the beginning? Because what you said earlier kind of made it sound to me like it wasn't. It was mainly for athletes. Or did I misunderstand that? Who was the customer at the very beginning of this?
The very beginning customer was the coaches of UltraFit Associates. I mean, it was purely built for coaches only.
Right.
And then it was like, hey, I think other people that want to follow Joe's training Bible methodology could use this too. And that's where I spent all this time building it for athletes.
Right.
But it was essentially the same thing. And think of the customer as coaches and people who like to coach themselves. And to this very day, it's the same thing, right? If you're inquisitive enough to want to understand why you're doing the workout that you're doing on the day that you're doing it and what it leads to, and what am I following some progression, that is who the ideal customer profile is for TrainingPeaks. And that's usually a type A engineer, somebody who's meticulous, somebody who's a little bit more anal, if you will. It's somebody who cares about, having a structured program versus somebody who's just riding a charity ride and just wants to finish the thing, and they probably won't ride their bike for 6 months afterwards. Right. So it was really for coaches. And we said, hey, I bet there's a bunch of people that would like to use these tools to coach themselves. And to Joe and Dirk's credit, right, they were like, hey, I paid you to write this app for my coaches, my business that they were paying their mortgages with. But they saw this vision, a bigger vision of like, wow, we could open it up to any coach and other athletes to do it the same. And I give them a massive amount of credit for, for seeing that opportunity. And I use this analogy to this day. Imagine the meetings at Starbucks when, Starbucks has these $billion business of going to a location and buying a $6 or $7 coffee. And somebody said, hey, why don't we take our exact same coffee and put it in supermarkets? And you can see people going, oh my gosh, that's going to keep people from going to our store. That'll kill us. And what it did, in fact, was actually drive even more revenue, because it's not just about the bean. It's about going there, the experience, somebody doing it for you. I don't have to get dirty. I'm on my way to work. There's so many other things that go into it. And Joe and Dirk kind of saw the same thing. That is, the coach or even the individual want access to the thinking of Joe Friel, right? They want access to tools to plan their training. They want structure. So if we can just give them more accessible ways to access that structure, the better off it'll be. And Joe said the same thing. He's like, I would never not write an article with the intent of keeping my knowledge to myself. He's like, spread as much knowledge as you can in every article that you can. People will still hire you for $1,000 a month because you're the one who wrote the article, not because you told them all the secrets. And it was a brilliant fact that to this day is still something I, really commend them for, in that it didn't hobble their business. It massively expanded it because everybody wanted, now had access to the Joe Friel way of doing things. And then, through the process of building the company, we really made it very careful to say, hey, this isn't only for Joe Friel methodology. It's for, you can have 5 heart rate zones. You can have 10 heart rate zones. You can have no heart. You can use power. You can use pace, whatever you want, right? Like, we really had a platform mindset, and I'd like to think that was stuff that I brought to the table, seeing a little bit more widespread, engineering stuff, but they weren't threatened by that. They were like, okay, great. Let's make it as accessible as possible.
That Starbucks analogy is perfect. Giving access to the platform to others actually expanded the market rather than cannibalize it. Dirk, is this still core to how you operate today, even with like hundreds of employees?
Yeah, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, that's in our DNA, is to solve the needs of the coach. And we're here to help the athlete achieve their dreams, but we want every athlete to leverage deliberate practice and get expert instruction. And we want to connect every athlete to expert instruction in some way, fashion, or form, whether it be a training plan, consultation, one-on-one coaching, training camp, whatever it might be. That's really, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do at TrainingPeaks is connect athletes to coaches to help the athlete achieve their dreams. And that technology plays in the middle, which can enhance that relationship, not replace it.
There's a name that's stuck forever in my head that's associated with TrainingPeaks gear, and it's Hunter Allen. I'm not completely sure why that is, but I think maybe I remember reading his column in an early UltraFit newsletter or something like that. But from what I understand, Hunter and a gentleman named Kevin Williams built some training analysis software called, I think, TrainingPeaks, and you guys acquired it. Tell me how that first came about and why it was a good strategic fit.
Yeah, I mean, we saw TrainingPeaks, probably in the 2003 timeframe, and it was just so good. It was such a good analysis tool. It was fast. It was beautiful at the time, the graphs that it produced. And we were just incredibly impressed with it. And Hunter, Hunter was leading the way on power training. Kevin was a brilliant developer. And, the web was still so early. I mean, we literally built this thing when there were modems, 56K modem that I was designing web pages for.
Yeah.
And so there's no way I was going to do some of the graphics that they were doing on a Windows app, even in 2004, even though the web was advancing incredibly quickly. And we just saw it as a way of like harnessing the power of an incredibly good analytics program, harnessing the power of some of the research and testing and application and development that they've been doing on, power meters and using power for training. And, over the years, we get various, emails about Training Bible. And the religious connotations as such. And we're like, hey, here's an idea. How about we bring it together? Training Bible and Cycling Peaks. Training Peaks is a natural. We'll change the name. We'll blend these together, and then we'll just make them work really fluidly and seamlessly together. And we basically, I didn't use the word, but I was like, we can store those files on our internet servers and feed them down to WKO too. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's cool. Let's try that. So, we had desktop and we had web and we had, some cloud-based services. So it ended up being a very natural combination. And, it was a very nerdy combination, but it was right at the genesis of Training with Power. And certainly Hunter was leading the way on that along with Andy Coggin. And, yeah, it's probably one of the smartest things we did.
Why was what was it, Cycling Peaks, now WKO? Why was that strategically important to the business? What did you see in it at the time that maybe you couldn't have developed yourself?
Yeah, I mean, they certainly along the way developed, training stress score, performance management chart, normalized power, a lot of these advanced training with power metrics we acquired, and hence have, trademarks around some of them. And, some of the math is secret, some of the math is public. So that really was a big kind of feather in our cap. And we needed to educate the marketplace because they are somewhat difficult to understand and how each one of these metrics relate to each other. So that's certainly where Joe came in, and we've had Training Peaks University and a lot of content, behind the education efforts of all of those standards that we see now as standards. But at the time, we're just like all new stuff. I like how Joe says, if you don't train with power, you see the world two-dimensionally. But once you add power to the mix, you now see the world 3D. Like you now see depth to your training. And there's like unanswered, you get answers there that you didn't quite understand before. So that's certainly now everywhere. That's, power meters come with the high-end bikes. They just come with power meters now. So at the time, it was definitely a big strategic move to kind of like spearhead and educate the market on this new thing called the power meter.
Training Peaks trademarked and popularized key training metrics like TSS, CTL, and ATL, which they call fitness, form, and fatigue. Concepts invented by Dr. Andy Coggin that became fundamental to how athletes and coaches measure fitness. These Training Peaks numbers became so synonymous with the platform that they created, I would argue, a significant competitive advantage.
Yeah, this is usually where I inject and say training isn't all about numbers. The subjective part of training most oftentimes needs to overweigh the objective part, the how you feel in the morning, how you slept, your motivation, all of that means so much in terms of making a decision on what to do today. You should not just sit back and say, oh, the numbers say I should do a 210 TSS ride today. Like, yes, that might be the intent going into today or next week or wherever it may be. But this dynamic loading, becoming more popular in terms of, hey, this is the game plan, but we're willing to change based on how you are recovering. So that recovery profile, and everybody's unique in terms of how well they recover. So that overrides the X's and O's and maybe the initial game plan. And a coach may ride out the next 4 weeks, but if you're getting one-on-one coach, and you're checking in with your coach, regularly, there should be often, quite a few changes along the way, but the main, path looks the same as you progress through the periods. So I often talk about the subjective side of training and how important that is, and the mental side of training and the motivation. And, there's all kinds of stress going on in your life that your power meter is not recording. Right? Your diet, your family life, your work life, that all, impacts your training. And that is the art of coaching. There is the science of coaching, which can be done at the Tour de France level. And for the most part, they can follow a really strong game plan and they don't alter too much along the way unless they get injured. But when you coach age group amateurs, that's where the art of coaching comes into play and the balance that's where the value of coaching comes in, and you have to apply science to real world life.
These handful of numbers, 3 basically, which are quite prominent on the home screen of TrainingPeaks, it resonates deeply with it seems like every athlete out there. And as you said, Joe, it was formulas this long, but do you feel sometimes this simplification of these numbers sometimes causes problems with I don't know, the TrainingPeaks is a tool for the athlete without fully understanding what's in behind these numbers? Or because I'd also argue this simplification is a big part of the huge stickiness and success of the TrainingPeaks app. What do you think of that statement?
Yeah, I would say most of the data that we collect for the athlete, like from a power meter, heart rate monitor, and so forth, is fairly basic to begin with. Your average power was such and such, but we can look at this in a slightly different way, and it tells us more about what's going on with your training. We can look at your normalized power, and that tells us something more. Then we can compare normalized power and average power, and that tells us something even more. So we can just keep adding on to these little bitty things, and by the time we get the athlete to understand all these things, they become much smarter, much wiser about their training. But it's not an easy road. I really feel sorry for athletes who don't have a coach and who are trying to figure out what all this means and how they can use it in their training. Coaches have this down pat. They understand what needs to be done for the athlete and how they can use data to do a better job of coaching the athlete, preparing training plans and such for them. But it really is a challenge for the non-coached athlete to try to figure this out. When I do consultations with athletes, I have to individual athletes, not coached athletes. I'm not trying to take anybody's coaching business away from them, but people come to me and say they want some consulting. What I find is they don't really understand what's going on. They're looking at the most basic things. What was my heart rate today? What was my average power? And that's about all as far as they get. And by the time you start explaining these other things to them, it can become overwhelming. So you got to take it in small bites. You got to say, let's get this one thing understood here. You begin to use it in training. And then we can start talking about the other things and it's slowly bringing them all in also. And because of all those things, along with everything else we're doing with training, nutrition, and Dirk mentioned the psychology of training, all these things we could bring together, we produce better athletes because of all this. So it's just a part of the mix, but it's got to be explained in small bites. It can't be done in huge platefuls of data.
Gear, I have to keep shifting my thinking to who the TrainingPeaks customer is because my default always keeps going back to my own use case, which is that of the athlete. I think the counterintuitive brilliance behind the coach being the primary customer is that it was probably extremely clear to you guys when someone like Strava launched that they're not really a competitor. Did it ever tempt you to try to go mass market and try to get millions of athletes instead of the thousands you'd probably get in the coaching and athlete space?
It's a great question. So here's what it came down to. We had so many internal discussions about this, and this is probably in that same time frame, 2009, 2010. We had grown, we were maybe 20 people at the time, and there was a huge debate inside the office that we were too hardcore and that we called things workouts, and there were other websites and apps that called them activities. Runkeeper from Jason Jacobs, My Fit or Map My Run, with Robin. Like, you logged an activity, not a workout. And we had this, we went rounds inside the office, and we actually went to our investor / partner, strategic consultant, who's now the CEO of Peakswear.
Is this Andy Stevens?
Yeah, Andy. And I mean, I remember this day because it brought unbelievable clarity. And I said, Andy, what should we do? Should we become an activity tracker, or should we stick to workouts? And he's like, have you ever gotten off your bike and said, this has been the greatest activity I've ever done? He's like, you are not activity people. You are hardcore workout, sweat. You're not doing this to lose weight. Don't change it. You're doing workouts, for God's sakes. You're training. And I was like, yes, that's it. We have to own workouts. And that literally set us free from worrying about Strava, from worrying about Map My Ride, from worrying about people doing the MS 150, from worrying about my mom needing to ride a bike. It literally unlocked the whole coach. Just go after coaches and people that want to act like coaches or train. And that was a pivotal moment that focused us so intently. And it was 2010 to 2012 we were doing yet another re-engineering of the platform. And 2012 our growth skyrocketed, and it was like we doubled down on, like, when you went to our homepage you saw a sweaty triathlete at Kona, right? When you went to My Fitness or Map My Fitness, you saw, a lady enjoying a bike ride. Like, we were like, nope, we are going for the hardcore 10% body fat triathlete. And we said that's the market we love. That's the market we have to own. And that's what we did.
Do you think that maybe the investors and the style of investment that they were involved with you guys really helped make that decision easy? Because, if you were to maybe, I don't know exactly the terms of you guys' investment or the relationships with them, but, if you were talking to, if you had heavy VC involvement, what direction they'd want you to go in. Was that a big enablement to focusing on that customer versus the mass?
Oh, 100%. Like, if we would have been institutionally funded, which we turned down left and right, you have to be as big as possible, right? Andy was all about be as sustainable as possible, and let's be profitable, and let's control our destiny. Like, which just aligned with me and Dirk and Joe's core ethos. And not to mention what we wanted to do. We saw a big enough market where we could make a sizable dent and own, that market of competitive or serious athletes and coaches. And so 100%, if it wasn't for, if he would have pushed us into the, swing for the fences, you have to be as big as possible, grow. Yeah, we probably wouldn't exist anymore.
Success breeds competition, and gear watched the landscape like a hawk.
What were some of the competitors who did come up throughout your time there that you did keep a very close eye on and think that, ooh, these guys are, we got to up our game?
Well, the very first one, we weren't the first. When we launched in 2000, PC Coach was the most widely known computer-based training tool out there, a Windows platform. And the web was in 2001 what AI is today. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody saw the potential. Nobody could really put their finger on exactly what the killer app was. Nobody used the web hardly for anything important, but you could feel it. And so PC Coach was one. Also, active.com. We have a long history with Active. They had their own training log tools at active.com, which is a race registration site way back then, and still is today. And then there was a few others. I'll name a couple. Obviously Robin and Map My Ride was a thing. Runkeeper came along in the app world in 2000, I don't know, 8, maybe 9, early. And that certainly caught our attention. Strava was the very first in 2009. If I'd be tempted to say I'm one of the first Strava users ever, because I would watch this stuff like a hawk. And when I saw them, motion based. Before I get to Strava, motion based was a GPS app that got bought by Garmin. It became Garmin Connect. They built that. Clark Weber and I can't remember the other guy's name. They built motion based in probably 2007 timeframe. It was amazing, right? It took GPS data, created tracks and routes. Garmin bought them. That became Garmin Connect. GPS was another amazing thing that came along during our tenure. Strava was probably the one where I went, oh shit, this is not only a killer feature, but the design was next level, right? We'd never seen anything as beautiful, right, on the web, and this killer feature where you go right up, like, how did we not think of that? How do you measure your fitness? Well, take a hill, and if you can go faster on it tomorrow than today, you must be getting fitter. And it was genius. And they did it all automatic through GPS, right? It was always a question of, okay, these people have a toehold in something. What if they go into coaching? And it just kept reaffirming, we got to double down, triple down, quadruple down on, we have to own every coach and make sure our platform is so good for coaches that they just won't go anywhere. And luckily, just like what you're saying, nobody saw the coaching market as big enough to pay attention to. And so Strava didn't go into coaching. I mean, they just bought Rudda, right? They're now getting into training plans. They're now seeing the potential of prescription, right? Which is stuff that we built a business off of.
This podcast is fully funded by our members at Escape Collective. In fact, all of our content on our website and our podcast network is 100% supported by our members who believe that cycling media should be independent from the sport and industry we cover, and that we should exist to serve you rather than live or die by our ability to be a platform for the sole purpose of selling you more stuff. If you enjoy this podcast or any of our other work and believe in our mission of independence, please go to escapecollective.com/join and become a member today. Thank you for your support.
Jumping ahead to 2010-ish, I think is around when you launched your mobile app. And there was lots starting to happen with devices and mobile and seamless connections and stuff. What was that time like in terms of your growth and the lessening of friction just to upload power files, heart files, and so forth, and then taking that stuff on the go with you and not having to use a computer, for example? Tell me about that time and what that unlocked for you guys.
Yeah, that was a fun, scary, crazy time. I mean, it was a little later than that. I call 2009 and 2012 two inflection points for us. We took our first round of investment in 2006, spent 2 years rebuilding some stuff, launched that in 2009, grew, and then we took another round of investment and used that to grow, to do a bunch more engineering. And it was like 2010, 11, can't remember exactly, but as mobile was becoming very popular, we felt very behind the times. So we were flat out scared. So we ended up acquiring some existing GPS apps, like a run tracking app, cycling training app. And it was a lot of money at the time. And they were nice looking apps, but just like anything, unless you put your full effort behind it, you can't keep pace with people who are putting their full effort behind it. So we bought these apps and we felt like we're like, okay, table stakes. Everybody, is Garmin even going to sell a computer in 2 years? Right? People are just going to use their phones. And that drove, some fear, certainly on my side. And we had to be on the mobile side of things. But like every crazy new thing, I mean, not like all, right? DVDs aren't really a thing anymore. Streaming kind of upended that. But most big new wave technology things, have a cycle of like, oh, everybody gets excited about, and then it kind of wanes and, back to normal. But that was an exciting time from the standpoint of we had re-engineered all of our products. Mobile was a thing. Certainly Strava was the biggest competitor that we saw in our entire time. They started in 2009. And they did just an amazing job, and they came up with a killer feature. Time yourself up a hill and then do it again 2 weeks later automatically, and you'll see if you're getting fitter. Genius. That was literally the basis of their entire, business, which is, it was phenomenal. So mobile was a thing. What we realized though, is that it wasn't, we just weren't in the world of the real-time data capture. We've always been about taking the data, analyzing it, and then telling you what to do next. Whether that was your heart rate zone, time you spent in heart rate zones that you manually entered from your Timex watch in 2001, whether that was analyzing a power meter file, no matter nobody could beat us in was analyzing the trove of data that you've collected from all these sensors.
Mhm.
So we actually retired all of our GPS apps. And by retired, I mean deleted them, and said, hey, you can go use any GPS app you want. We just worked with Garmin and Polar and many others to have the data get centralized back to TrainingPeaks, right? Dirk and I always wanted roll into your garage, push a button, and have the data just go into TrainingPeaks and be analyzed and, tell you what to do tomorrow.
Mm.
And we saw that actually happen over the years. So that was a fun time, kind of crazy, but it also makes you realize what is your real absolute core value proposition. And ours was not real-time data collection. It was data analysis after the fact, and then taking that into what the plan should be going forward.
You mentioned a lot of third-party platforms just in this part of the conversation that TrainingPeaks arguably now relies on, whether it's head units like Garmin, Wahoo, or SRMs, Apple, and then Strava. And how much do you worry, or did you worry, or at least conscious of the fact that you guys are now part of an ecosystem that if anyone wants to either cut off their APIs or do something similar, who were much bigger than you guys, like a Garmin, for example. Did you guys spend much time thinking about that? Or did you feel that at a certain point you guys had built a moat that you were too big for them to cut you off?
That was the race. I mean, we knew we never really wanted to be in the hardware business, but early on, our vision was finish a bike ride, push a button, and have your data accessible to learn from how your ride went and to change what you do tomorrow based on that. And so very early on, 2001, really, we started reaching out to hardware manufacturers. I built an interface to upload Polar HRM files, PowerTap CSV files, SRM files. I wanted to bring in data, because the power of bringing in your entire data instead of just saying, I spent 18 minutes in zone 3 was so, there was so much more value that could be extracted from that. And so what you just said is exactly right. We wanted to partner with companies where we could add value to their hardware, and then try and get as many people using it that if they ever contemplated taking it off, we could send one email and tell 10,000 people, hey, Garmin's decided not to work with us and your watch no longer is useful. Because at the end of the day, even today, software is what keeps the relationship for the long term. Hardware is seen as the somewhat commodity. Now they have a bio, a symbiotic relationship, obviously. But software is what you use every day on top of the hardware, and software is what you experience with pretty much every piece of hardware. And so we wanted to just do the best job. Again, going back to something I said a while ago, the more data you put in TrainingPeaks, the more we can tell you about yourself, the more value you get out of it, no matter what hardware you use, whether it was a Wahoo, an SRM, PowerTap, Polar. We wanted to be the single source that all of that could come and you could make sense out of it, whether you were running, cycling, biking, rowing, whatever. And so it became a race. And, not that long, whatever, a few years after doing it all, we had tens of millions of files uploaded, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of customers using it every day. And, the manufacturers saw the value. They can't think of everything either, just like we can't think of everything. And so they saw the value of partnering with us. Now Garmin and others went on to do their own version of what we do, right? Training programs and analysis and this, that, and the other. And I don't know that, any of them have made a real business out of it. I mean, Wahoo had their 4D process that Neil was obviously a part of. I don't think that became a commercial success, or they weren't. Again, their whole, when you're a hardware company, your goal is to sell hardware, not deal with the ins and outs of the software. So we provided and knew exactly where our value proposition was, and we just continued to push the gas pedal to make sure that people would absolutely hate it if manufacturers pulled out. And I think that proved well, because I don't know, TrainingPeaks works with 200 different devices now and 50 companies, and is very popular.
Dirk, how do you think about entering new markets, and what is a new market in your eyes? Do you think of them as different sports or different countries or different languages? How do you address them?
It's a cross section. It's all of that. You have new geographies for new sports with new languages, and every single new opportunity has a different profile to it. So I believe what we do is we have a lot of opportunity that's coming to us, and it's difficult to take advantage of all of it. So, we are hiring, for example, on the global partnership side, we need more staff to help take care of our partners and grow into new sports. So the way I like to do it is what I've seen be successful is you start from the top. So hopefully you find the world's best coach in alpinism, which we happen to do. And they came to TrainingPeaks. We showed them how to grow a business and have their athletes managed through TrainingPeaks. And they grew a very successful coaching business for mountaineering. Wow, that's great. We can now, there's proof of concept, and we can now start to open up that marketplace more. We looked for opportunities around national governing bodies. There's a new sport that's discovered. TrainingPeaks have a national governing body with a great coaching education wing, within that organization. If they do, that's a great match. We can partner with their coaching education department to train more coaches to come on board in whatever new sport that may be. So yeah, again, I think I like to look at new sports that have a big name coach that is really loving their experience within TrainingPeaks, and then around that coach are there opportunities to expand into that new market, whatever it be.
So again, this keeps coming back to your decision that coaches are your main customer focus, doesn't it? I mean, like, you only have to go to one top tier coach or an organization or whatever to get started into a new market versus trying to speak to thousands of people to get into that market. And you only have to build relationships with far fewer people being coaches. Is that the thinking?
Yeah. True. I think relationships mean a lot more when you do that.
Yeah.
The trust means a whole lot. If you bring that coach, that organization on, there's a relationship that's built and a trust. And because we are seeing a lot of opportunity now. Just this week, we released 46 new sport subtypes. So yoga and stand-up paddleboarding and surfing and ski mountaineering and roller skiing and skate skiing, classic skiing, 46 different new sports, because many of these sports are demanding, a better way of tracking their primary sport, which isn't cycling, running, swimming. So yeah, I mean, I think, it can be, you could see it as being easier, but also it's all about the relationships you build as well and maintain.
So I didn't
along the
mean
way.
to imply easier. I just meant
Yeah,
far
yeah.
more effective and sticky,
Yeah.
I imagine, as well, because the athletes will go maybe all over the place until they have maybe years of data in there. But they kind of have to go where the coach is going at the end of the
Yeah.
day, don't they?
Yeah, we rely on the coach to do a lot of our education. They are
Yeah.
training the athlete on what these metrics mean, how to leverage TrainingPeaks. And it was difficult for a cycling coach to bring on athletes, in the whole new virtual world, right? So now we have TrainingPeaks virtual, and the purpose of that was to serve the need of the coach, so that workouts sync, so that zones sync. There's more coming out that's going to help the coach in a virtual world, being TrainingPeaks virtual. So yeah, it's like listening. It's a voice of customer leads product.
Yeah.
That's what's fun about it too.
Yeah. So TrainingPeaks was just the beginning. Let me ask you about the larger vision that became Peakswear, which you, Gear, were the CEO of for around 20 years.
Yeah, it was really an expansion of the core value of what TrainingPeaks does. And at the end of the day, it's about deliberate practice to learn a skill that you're interested in. And so whether that skill is riding a bike fast, running far, playing a clarinet, learning a piece of sheet music, picking up a really heavy thing, picking it up 50 times in a row, right? The idea behind Peakswear is to bring together software platforms that help people learn a skill through deliberate practice. And deliberate practice is a fancy way of saying structured training, a structured approach. Again, not for your mom who wants to bike so she can lose a few pounds, but for somebody who wants to train and actually get better at their craft. And so Andy Stevens, he had purchased Make Music and Alfred Music in the a software maker in the music world, as well as you can't learn music without having sheet music, and that's a very controlled process with lots of copyrights and whatnot. So he approached me and Dirk in 2000 and maybe it was 12 or 13, and said, "Hey, let's imagine bringing these all together. There's so many similarities between how people train for a triathlon and how people train to learn a musical instrument." And, at first I heard it, I was like, "You're crazy." And the more he showed us, behind the scenes, the more I was like, "Holy crap. It's the exact same thing. It's just that instead of getting on a bike every day, I pick up a saxophone every day." Right. But it's the principles, and what Andy's brilliant at is applying and understanding principles of behavior. The principles are exactly the same. So it was the strategy around, you know, let's take these different software platforms and all around deliberate practice to learn a skill and make something bigger out of it than just, any one particular company could. So we acquired Train Heroic, which is a strength and conditioning, platform for training. We then merged in Alfred and Make Music. And he's like, "I want you to do with Peakswear what you did with TrainingPeaks."
So Peakswear, the thesis there is we help people learn a new skill through deliberate practice. We want whatever you're in love with, we want you to work with an expert, an instructor, a coach, a teacher. But technology can play a part between the two. I mean, technology-wise, they're all unique and different. They leverage their own technologies. We all share the same business services, accounting, recruiting, finance, that's all shared across all of our brands. So Andy saw opportunity to take what we've developed at TrainingPeaks and the fundamental business of servicing the instructor to help the end user achieve a goal at an event. You can take that same model and apply it to almost anything that people are trying to get better at. So he saw opportunity in music. And so now we have Make Music Cloud. It's the #1 K through 12 music education app in America. Like the LA school district, Chicago school districts, are customers. Those students have the app on their iPad or whatever they have at home. And traditionally, the music teacher said, go home and practice your clarinet 20 minutes a day, but there's no accountability. Parents can't help you. They never played the clarinet. So it really, who cared, right?
There's no
Now,
TSS for clarinet.
yeah,
Or
now
is
there
there
is.
now?
So you open up your iPad and there is your sheet music and you play your oboe, clarinet, whatever it may be. And it can record, obviously, but it can also assess. So if you hit the note properly, it turns green. If
Is
you
that
miss the
right?
note, it turns red. So the student, without any help from their parent or teacher, is getting immediate feedback. It's being recorded. And just like a coach who wakes up in the morning to see who did their workout yesterday and how well did they do, did they do 20 minutes in zone 3 like I prescribed. Now a music teacher can do the same thing. Who did their homework? How well did they do? And who needs my assistance? So you can now start to individualize the music instruction at home, whereas you couldn't in the past without technology, just like a cycling coach does today with power and heart rate files. So that's Make Music. We have a publishing business, Alfred Publishing. Um, basic piano, and we also have Suzuki method. The Suzuki method of learning the violin is really popular worldwide. So we have the rights to all their content, and we, bring that into the app. And we also have it online, esports. So we have Coachify. So Coachify, like League of Legends, is bigger than the Super Bowl. Like the amount of people that watch the finals of League of Legends live worldwide is bigger viewership than the Super Bowl. And these now gamers are hiring coaches to level up. So now we have Coachify for coaches to help people with their gaming, with their games, their League of Legends. And we have APIs. So you can see reenactments of the game. You can see stats on the game. The coach can do video markup of the game. So then the player can review where they made mistakes, advice from the coach for the next round, for example. And some of these games are team games. So you play a specific role. So how do you interact with your teammates is really important, right? And there's professional leagues, and you can get full ride D1 scholarships in the US to like University of Texas and Miami, as a gamer. So it's a real thing. So that's our latest startup is Coachify.gg.
In around 2009, TrainingPeaks became the go-to software platform for a few of the World Tour teams, and in later years, it was pretty much ubiquitous across professional riders and coaches. But as Dirk explains, it wasn't easy, and it was far ahead of its time.
In the World Tour cycling world, yeah, specifically, I think it was 06 or 07. It was the first T-Mobile team. So it was Mark Cavendish's very first team. I was at his very first training camp in Mallorca. Yeah. And that year it was taken over by Bob Stapleton. So I owe a lot to Bob Stapleton and the coach of the team, at that time, Dr. Lothar Heinrich. They both wanted to bring structured training to all the team members. Prior to that point, teams were not mandated to have high performance staff, which they are now. That was not mandated by the UCI. So literally every athlete would go home and do their own training or whatever else they wanted to do. And there was no oversight. There was no accountability. It was just show up to the next race and you're only as good as your last result. And they wanted to change that culture. And so Bob Stapleton, made a big effort. That team became HTC. We continued with HTC as well. And then the next year is like, we got like 5 new teams because now teams are starting to see like we need to give training and coaching advice to these athletes, which seems obvious, but that was not common in cycling back then, to have training direction coming from the team. And the older athletes were very resistant. I mean, I remember going to training camps and I was the bad guy. I was ignored. I was off in the corner. Only the young athletes would come talk to me, Cavendishes of the world and Marco Pinotti and the younger athletes. But the old guard, I was a bad guy, and they would not first of all, they wouldn't even ever travel with a computer. That's like, no way am I ever going to travel with a computer. But the young guys had computers. So it was a slow kind of infiltration, but then also the culture of the internal dynamics of the teams changed, and you were accountable. By 2008 timeframe, things were really kind of starting to change. And then it proliferated in every team. We worked with every team. We still, I don't want to say what teams were not, but only a couple were not. But it was definitely a trend that we rode. And I think we brought a lot of value, and we still do. And it's great having those partnerships. I just got back from the Tour de France and met with almost every single world tour coach that was in attendance, and they now have data analysts. And so we now have partnerships with data analysts, to help them get to data. Every team is going to have their own unique reports. That's always going to be the same. But yet we can help them manage all the data that's coming in. And we're compatible with all their different device manufacturers as well, whatever power meter, heart rate, breathing device, glucose monitor, whatever it may be. And now they're strength coaches. All the team's strength coaches are programming through TrainingPeaks. Their nutritionists are looking at completed data, planned workouts, and putting in the nutrition guidance into TrainingPeaks. So it's pretty fun. It's awesome to see the growth of it.
And I imagine the athletes probably are almost exclusively on mobile, and the coaches are on desktop. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's pretty much true. I mean, there's so many more tools. Coaches need a big screen. Sometimes we're looking at multiple athletes at once, just to be able to look at overlaying different athlete data, pulling from one athlete calendar to another, one training plan to another. They really do like to have the big real estate of a big screen, even dual screens. Like a lot of coaches just using dual screens. So they might have 3 screens in front of them, managing their athlete load, building training plans, whatever it may be, managing their business. We now have, you can, run all your payments through TrainingPeaks now. So you can see, the revenue coming through, et cetera. So the mobile app for the coach is really for like quick review and notifications. So there's great features where, if an athlete updates their training log, it'll automatically send a notification to the coach. And the coach might be waiting for the dentist in the waiting room. They can open up the mobile app and review today's workout real quick and send back a really quick note, of advice on how the workout went. And that has great value, for the athlete. It's like just in time coaching. And when you experience that as an athlete, you're like, wow, that's why I have a coach. I can't talk about today's workout with my spouse, right? But you can with this special person, your coach. And so that mobile app for the coach is really, really valuable, more so on the communication side of things.
Right. The other big unlock that I feel might have made a difference to your business was the seamless syncing with devices such as head units, and those being Wi-Fi compatible or syncing to your phone. And instead of plugging in your power meter head unit or whatever and uploading it and then emailing it or uploading it to TrainingPeaks and all that rigmarole, I know for Strava that was a massive, massive thing. How did it affect your business, and what were the positive things that happened, and maybe what were some of the challenges with that as well?
We got rid of 80% of our support load when that happened.
Is that right?
I mean, as I said before, every device manufacturer had their own proprietary file format. They had their own, desktop software you had to download to. Then they would come out with a firmware change every other week. So we had a thing called the device agent. And this device agent could communicate with your device and shuttle the data to TrainingPeaks to make it easier. So you didn't have to open up whatever software it was in the middle. But in order to make that happen, we had to be up to date with all the firmware changes, but most of the manufacturers wouldn't even tell us when a firmware change was coming out. It would just break. And then we'd have, 100 more support, emails overnight, or 500, whatever it may have been. So that was a huge headache.
Yeah, I bet. Would you guys have been in close contact, your tech guys, with Garmin, for example? Or is Garmin, this giant in the world, kind of like, we don't really need to, these guys aren't really worth our time? Or how did that dynamic work?
I mean, back when we were small, for sure, they didn't need to help us at all, so we were just always trying to chase updates. But then I also owe a lot to Garmin. They were on the forefront of creating the standards, the dot fit format we all use now. It was ANT Plus, and now Bluetooth is won over. And just that protocol alone right there, Bluetooth is just changed the entire industry. So I'm thankful for all the work that they've done to help pioneer that. I'm also, I am also happy how our industry has been open. We all have kind of gravitated towards this one protocol, and that's a great thing. That really helps advancement on the technology side of things, and also new startups. It makes it easier for new startups to come into the marketplace. So you got to be good at what you do to survive. But I'm thankful, and early on, Polar and Sunto did not play that game. They continued to have their own silos while Garmin was creating this protocol. And finally, they've had to get on board, but they suffered. They suffered for a decade because they didn't get on the standard. And because they didn't get on the standard, they couldn't break into the US market. So now they have opportunity. So yeah, I mean, certainly Garmin is huge and massive. They didn't need us, but now we play together. They know coaches rely on us, and they want coached athletes to buy Garmin's, and Wahoo wants coached athletes to buy Garmin's. And, so we're all kind of, if you will, nice frenemies. We all play in the same sandbox in different ways. But we support the coach, and we're agnostic to coaching methodology. We're agnostic to devices. We're agnostic to what kind of nutrition plan you want to follow. So yeah.
How do you maintain relationships with all the partners that you have to coexist with, that create an ecosystem that makes you all successful, while simultaneously perhaps overlapping and competing with some of their products?
Yeah, we all kind of compete, but we also all kind of rely on each other. So luckily, I think we all realize that. We had a representative at Eurobike, and they went to all the device manufacturers to, get that personal touch. So, I think when new things come out, we want to be compatible. If coaches see opportunity with some new device or whatever it may be, we want to be compatible and right there with them, So I think because we built our place in the world around coaching, that's also means those new players coming into the market want to be compatible with us as well, even though what they offer may overlap in some area of something we do. They still want access to the coaches, so we'll play friendly.
The ecosystem you guys rely on, and there's some giants in there like Garmin, Apple, Strava, to sync athlete data. You said you just keep on your toes, but is it something you worry about? Have you seen competitors come in?
I think you always need to worry.
Yeah.
I think we always need to. I don't think take anything for granted. I've never have. So it's definitely something, you got to stay. Competition's good. It keeps bringing out the best in you, So yeah, certainly you always, as an entrepreneur, are always worried. It still
Second
feels,
you don't, you die, eh?
Yeah, you can't just sit back, and got to keep going, building a strong team. Like, I've just been amazed with the staff that we've had on the way and we have today, and how well they're growing as a team. Every year we unlock something in coaching we didn't think of before, and that's why it stays exciting as well.
COVID presented mixed challenges. While races disappeared, more people discovered endurance sports and coaches gained new clients. The pandemic accelerated the shift to virtual training and proved TrainingPeaks' value for remote coaching relationships. But COVID wasn't rocket fuel for the business like it was for others. TrainingPeaks grew deliberately and sustainably.
Dirk would know better, but I think TrainingPeaks is in the 80 or 85 person range, something like that. Like,
Right.
they're sizable businesses. The most amazing thing is they've been profitable since day one.
Yeah.
We've well, I guess I can't speak because I haven't seen the P&L for the last 4 years, but under my management, we grew every single year 20% minimum. So we were always very careful to be profitable, always reinvesting, money into R&D and people. And we just took a totally different tack than what the venture capital society world wanted us to do. And maybe that was part strategy, but it was also just, that's who Dirk and I were. And that's who Andy is.
When you kind of came through pretty formative times of your career when that wasn't available, when the whole VC mindset wasn't nearly as prominent, like you had to grow by your own retained profits. And this is a pretty new phenomena that we'll see how long it lasts. But it's like, if you don't have AI in your pitch these days, no one will listen to you, right? So
right. Well, it always rings true. If you can build a profitable business, there's a good chance you've built a sustainable business. And if control and doing what you want every day is interesting, that's a good way to go. And that's just kind of who we were, right? If you can build a sustainable, profitable business, you have every option open to you, right? There are plenty of other people that would like to buy that or be part of that, et cetera. But Peaksware today it's cool. They've continued to grow. They've reached or expanded into the e-coaching, video game coaching world, payments and systems. Like, they continue to look at other verticals, if you will, to apply the same theories, right? Deliberate practice, coaching, et cetera. So it's a very sizable business, and they continue to manage it well.
Maybe last question you just kind of reminded me of. You have made more acquisitions than I was first aware of. Have you, in your time there, did you get better at integrating those and leveraging those acquisitions? Did you come up with a playbook eventually of how you were going to do that, or was it always a little bit hit and miss, or how did that evolve over time?
Yeah, good one. Let me run through the acquisitions we did. Certainly CyclingPeaks was first.
Which worked well.
Best Bike Split was another. And then on the music side, we bought a French company called Weezik. So I spent quite a bit of time in Paris. They had certain music technology. Not to mention, we merged all the businesses together. That was less of an acquisition and more of a combination, if you will, bringing it under Peaksware umbrella. Train Heroic was another one that we did in 2012, maybe.
Okay.
That was a very, very young startup. 2 guys, Ben and Josh, great guys. That one took a while, but it's sustainable, certainly now, and grew. Did we build a playbook? No. The things that I learned the most, it can't just be my idea. The key there in those acquisitions, and this is, I don't think anybody's ever figured this out ideally, you have to have the rest of the company bought in to the idea on where they're going to fit, how it's going to work, what problems it's solving, et cetera. And I probably ramrodded a couple of those in, where I was like, how do you not see this? This is so obvious. We have to have this. And then, the rest of the team's like, whoa, I got a full-time job. What am I supposed to do with this? But we did get a little bit smarter. And again, that's kind of where Andy comes in. He's certainly better at process and some of that rigor, versus I'm more of the vision and sort of idea strategy side of it. But I don't know that I certainly wouldn't claim that I ever developed it into a methodical process, but they've certainly gotten better since I've been gone. He's brought in a lot of other people with more experience on the acquisition side.
Dirk, the recent acquisition of Indie Velo, which became TrainingPeaks Virtual, seems to have broken the pattern of focus on coaching of coaches. This seemed to be a very consumer-facing product for a coaching-focused company. What made this one make sense for you guys?
Yeah, like I said, the coaches, it was difficult in the coaching world to bring on athletes. You don't know if an athlete wants to train indoors or outside today, and to give them that option. Certainly when the winter months come along and they want to train primarily or exclusively indoors, it was difficult to bring athletes on board to 2 different platforms or 3, wherever it may be. We also allow the coach to create their own private or public group rides and races. We stay out of it altogether. So every single coach can create their own race series. They can do Wednesday group rides at 3:30 just for their 18 clients, VIP style. A coach can actually log in as a spectator. They don't have to ride. They can spectate and coach their group of athletes. They can chat with their group of athletes, but they aren't on the bike. So we see a lot of great opportunity to bring coaching services into that virtual world. So it's just so seamless. Just launch it from TrainingPeaks mobile app. We have the TrainingPeaks virtual, but we also have the TrainingPeaks hub, and the hub is where you communicate. You can join races and message people, etc. So yeah, a lot of great stuff coming out this fall.
Back to some devices that we spoke about earlier. What are some of the new sensor technologies that are in development that you're watching closely that, could impact how your roadmap?
Yeah. Luckily now I can say whatever is in the .fit file, we display, and we can now say that for about the last 3 months. So whatever new device comes out, if it's got a data channel in the .fit file, we now display it. One of the new devices I'm going to check out because I'm curious is the TimeWear. Have you heard of TimeWear?
No.
The breathing respiration device. So it's a chest strap. It's both a heart rate monitor as well as a respiration device. So it measures your expansion, contraction of your chest cavity and relating that to, tidal volume and respiration rate, and tracking that to VT1, VT2, ventilatory threshold 1, VT2, etc. So might have some promise. I met with them at the Tour de France. I'm getting a device. We'll play around with it. I know supposedly Visma Elisa bike, it trains with it. So yeah, that's one of the kind of exciting ones. One that kind of came and went was unfortunately, Super Sapiens, the continuous glucose monitor. Certainly continuous glucose monitors are here to stay, but primarily right now for health reasons. Super Sapiens tried to break into the endurance market. For whatever reason, they didn't survive, but we displayed their data. We synced with their device, their app. So yeah, gosh, what other? Oh, core body temperature. That's a kind of cool, exciting one. A lot of the teams, you see this on TV during the Tour de France. A lot of the guys have it right here on their chest strap, on the side of their chest. It's a little square looking white thing. And that's showing their core body temperature, fluctuations through the race. Heat training, heat adaptation is the thing. There's a lot of cool studies coming out showing the value of heat adaptation to help prepare you for altitude, as well as when you leave altitude camps and you go back down to sea level, you can help maintain those benefits longer with heat, active and passive heat training. So the core can play a valuable part of that for a coach.
How much work is it for you and the developers and everything at TrainingPeaks when a new device comes along, like Super Sapien, and integrating it into what you do, interpreting the data that you get from it, and then it goes out of business? Is that a huge disruption for you and the amount of energy and focus you've put into that? Or is it something that you act very slowly on to make sure it's going to stick around through maybe past experience? Or what's that like for you when something new
Yeah.
comes along and your decision making around it?
I would say it used to be a big burden, but now it's become much easier to filter through and decide what's worth investing more time in. Certainly these devices reach out and ask for our API. We filter through every single API application. We don't just make it public. That's always been well protected. And we sift through their business case. What are they trying to do? Is it worth giving them our API? If they get access to our API, then we can start tracking and seeing what they're developing. And they want to update us on their progress and the value they bring to us. So they reach out frequently. So I think it's gotten easier in that regard, as also because we are now displaying everything in the .fit file. So it's not just a one-off development.
How does it feel now being the incumbent and the big guy that people are wanting things from you, where we spoke about earlier, you're like trying to get information from Garmin and, oh, what if Garmin doesn't allow us to do this? And like you were the one that wasn't necessarily listened to. And now it sounds like people are wanting to get, partnerships with you. How does that feel 25 years later?
Oh man, I think you need to always remember your roots and where you came from. And like we said earlier, don't take it for granted. It's a nice position to be in, but also building that relationship, in the proper way and developing that trust, so that we are seen as the place, the go-to opportunity for new devices or new whatever it may be, new sports, whatever. All these things are the same in my mind. It's just new opportunity.
You don't look like the guys who want world dominance and to be the most powerful technology company in the sporting arena.
Yeah, no. I mean, we're definitely in it. As you can tell, this is our 25th year anniversary. So we're in it for the long haul.
Fascinating business. I'm just loving hearing there's so much more to this than I ever thought until I started looking, down the rabbit holes. Maybe just last, what kind of company are you guys building long term? Is this something that is a family business that will be left to kids? Is this something that you hope for an acquisition one day? Is this something you're just going to sort of leave it to what comes up? How do you see it playing out 25 years later, maybe, in terms of what you want?
Well,
for
maybe
the business?
started as a quasi-family business. It's not a family business, but I think it's more about obviously bringing value to our customers and being paid in return for the value that we create, so that we can create a long-term, sustainable, profitable business, which is what we've been proving out.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know what'll come down the road. We're certainly not looking for an exit next year, for example. If we were, we'd be playing a totally different game, right? But I see there's some partners going to come along with the right attitude, and they have the right passion for what we do, and they could bring us a bigger opportunity. I don't know how that'll play out, but certainly open to that. But we're not in it per se exit. I think it's more about building this to live on past us, to be a strong business, forever.
Very un-American of you.
So yeah, and to be profitable for the shareholders along the way. It's nice to have profit along the way too.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think if you started this business within the past 10 years versus 25 years ago, do you think that outlook would be the same? Because I don't think you would have had the luxury of raising $50 million, straight off the bat back then versus like you see SaaS businesses do now. Do you see that as a bit of a blessing that you never?
Yeah. I do. I think
the timing wasn't like that.
A lot of businesses that have a lot of great potential bite off too much at the beginning. They raise too many funds up front. And they just can't hit those lofty goals quick enough, and then it goes under. But yet the fundamental idea reincarnates later on, maybe a couple years later, with the right mix of ownership and funds and market dynamics. So I do, it's both, right? It's like I feel grateful that we didn't have that happen to us and take on way too much up front and go under. And then what am I going to do? The thing is, like, if this is what I do for my life, this is just what I do every day. Like I play out my passion, so it's great to do, and I'm fortunate. But also, like, we've had to pass up opportunities because we couldn't, maybe chase some opportunity that took $10 million, but that may have not been successful. So who knows? But it probably would be different starting up a business today. If you're proving traction early on, you see fairly easy to raise money, compared to 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were at the right place at the right time with the right message. It's kind of like sometimes you're lucky and sometimes you aren't, and we were very lucky. But it wasn't all luck. We had people making decisions along the way, like Dirk and like Gear and like Andy Stevens later on and so forth, who've made good decisions, and those things have paid off with all the things we have right now in this company. So we're very happy with the way the company's going. It is not a family business. It is owned by, there are many shareholders. We just happen to be, Dirk and I just happen to be members of the same family that work at the same company. Him more than me, by the way. So we were just at the right place at the right time. And I can't really tell you anything more than that about how we became successful.
Well, even though you say, Joe, that your day to day isn't too involved, anymore, but what does it feel looking back 25 years ago at what you helped create? How does it feel
Well,
now?
it's very good. But quite honestly, I've got more things to think about these days about writing a book, for example. How am I going to make this point, or how do I organize these thoughts I've got? And so those things, it's still not, it's not what I did. It's what I'm going to do or I'm doing is what really motivates me. And I'm happy as hell that we were able to pull off something like this with just a handful of people originally. And it's become as big as it has become. So I couldn't be any happier, but I'm not living in the past. I'm thinking about the future.
Dirk, you're listed on your email signature, and I think many other places as the chief evangelist. And you just said that you're living your passion. What does day to day look like for you at this point of the
Yeah.
business?
Well, luckily I went to the Tour de France, so that's part of my job description. Love doing that. Again, my passion lives on. I'd say I play a lot in business development, as you mentioned, with new devices, new things coming out, new markets, new sports. I love playing in that area and discovering new ways of seeing things or playing with devices. So definitely work closely with the partnership team, business development team, PR, marketing, going to events and kind of being the face of the brand, representing the brand is what I love doing. And helping with the relationships. I have a lot of relationships built up over the years that still exist, in cycling and triathlon and beyond today, and trying to develop the next, level of new partnerships and relationships. So I guess in one word, it is about relationship building and kind of looking forward to, within business development is the majority of what I do.
Yeah, well, but there is definitely a time of the business that it is very awkward because you are doing it all, aren't you? Like,
Absolutely. I mean, between Gear and I, we were answering every single support ticket and building the product, and paying out vendors and keeping the books. And between the two of us, and then, okay, within 2 years, we had to start outsourcing, some of that stuff, and it just continued to grow. And hopefully you hire the right people along the way. And we have. And so you end up having to give up what you were the world's best at one time. You thought you were the world's best at whatever it was. but then you just need to swallow your pride and be like, yeah, someone else can do a lot better job than me more efficiently.
What started as Joe Friel writing training plans on paper in his running store in the early 90s has become an over 300-person company that's quietly powering the training of everyone from weekend warriors to Tour de France teams to musicians to gamers. The lesson? Sometimes the best businesses aren't built for the masses. Relentless focus on who your customer is and having the freedom to stay true to that is what I would argue a massive part of their success. 25 years later, TrainingPeaks remains profitable, independent, and meaningful to the communities who use it. Gear Fisher has now moved on to his own startup called OnForm. It takes a lot of the learnings from TrainingPeaks and is a platform for sports coaching that helps develop athlete performance through video analysis. Check it out at onform.com. I'm Wade Wallace, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Overnight Success from Escape Collective. Editing was done by Red Bricks Media, and the music was composed by Ashley Deneve. Thanks for listening.